I'm about to ruin your day with some math. If you're 27 years old right now, making around $65,000 a year, and you want to retire a millionaire, you're looking at roughly 2032 before you hit that milestone. That's 8 years from now. Except wait, I forgot to mention, that timeline assumes you've already got $100,000 saved up and invested. Oh, you don't have $100,000 saved? Well, then we're talking more like 2041. You'll be pushing 45 by the time you cross 7 figures. Still want to hear more? Because it gets worse before it gets better. But understanding the actual timeline might be the most valuable thing you learn about money this year. My name is Drew, and I've analyzed enough wealth-building journeys to know that people's expectations are wildly disconnected from reality. If you've ever wondered why you're not rich yet, despite doing everything right, or if you're tired of Instagram gurus promising you millions by 30, hit that subscribe button because we're about to get brutally honest about how long this actually takes. Here's what happened to my college roommate Dave. Smart guy, engineering degree, landed a solid job right out of school, making $72,000. He read all the right books, set up his 401k, started investing 10% of his paycheck, did everything the personal finance subreddit told him to do. 5 years later, I asked him how it was going. He had about $48,000 saved up, which sounds decent until you realize he'd contributed about $42,000 of that himself. 5 years of discipline and compound interest had given him a whopping $6,000. He could barely hide his disappointment. At this rate, he said, I'll be 60 before any of this matters. And you know what? He wasn't wrong. That's actually how it works. The first decade of wealth building feels like pushing a boulder uphill in quicksand while wearing roller skates. You're expending maximum effort for minimum results, and every fiber of your being is screaming that this strategy is broken. Let's talk about what actually happens in your 20s, because this decade sets the tone for everything else. You graduate. You're probably hauling around $30,000 in student loans. You land an entry-level position, paying maybe $45,000 if you're lucky. After taxes, you're taking home around $3,000 a month. Rent eats up $200. Car payment and insurance take another $450. Student loan minimum payment is $280. We haven't even gotten to food yet, and you're down to $1,070 for literally everything else in your life. But every financial advisor on the planet is telling you to save 15% of your income, which would be $562 a month. So now you've got $508 left for groceries, gas, phone bill, internet, clothes, emergencies, and occasionally doing something that doesn't make you want to drive your car into a river. This is the math that breaks people. They try it for 3 months, realize they're miserable, and decide that wealth building is a lie sold by people who were born rich. The ones who make it through typically do one of two things. Either they find ways to earn more money, or they accept a lifestyle that looks nothing like what their peers are living. I knew this girl in her 20s who lived with 3 roommates despite making $68,000. Her friends thought she was insane. They were all in their own apartments, driving new Camrys, going on trips. She was sleeping in a room the size of a closet and driving a 2009 Civic with a dent in the passenger door. But check this out. By 29, she had $87,000 saved. Her friends? Maybe $15,000 combined if you're being generous. Most of them had nicer apartments and better cars, but negative net worth when you factored in their debts. She looked broke, but she'd built more wealth in 6 years than most people build in 15. That's the invisible part of wealth building that nobody photographs for Instagram. The sacrifices look boring. Staying in on Saturday night because you're not spending $80 at bars isn't content. Driving past the dealership every day without upgrading your car doesn't make for a compelling story. Saying no to the group vacation doesn't earn you any social credit. The entire first phase of building wealth is about being comfortable with looking less successful than you actually are. Now, let's jump to your 30s, where life decides to stress test your financial discipline. This is when you're supposed to have your act together, right? You're making more money. Let's say you've worked your way up to $85,000. You feel like you should finally be able to breathe financially. Except now you're married, which comes with a wedding that somehow cost $28,000, despite you trying to keep it simple. Then babies show up, and suddenly you're hemorrhaging $1,400 a month on daycare for an infant who doesn't even remember being there. You buy a house because that's what adults do, and the mortgage is $2,400 a month. Property taxes add another $380. Homeowner's insurance is $115. Then the water heater explodes, which is $1,300 you didn't budget for. The roof needs replacing in the next few years, which is going to be $12,000 you don't have. Your 401k contributions drop from 15% to 6% because you're just trying to keep all the plates spinning. I watched this exact scenario play out with my sister. At 31, she had $73,000 saved and was crushing her financial goals. By 37, she had $89,000. 6 years of her life, and her net worth grew by $16,000. She was still contributing to retirement, still being responsible, but the accumulation had slowed to a crawl because life got expensive. She'd call me frustrated, convinced she was doing something wrong. But she wasn't. She was just living through the decade where everyone's wealth building hits a speed bump. The cruel irony is that your 30s are when you're finally making decent money, but it's also when your expenses explode faster than your income grows. You're not irresponsible. You're just getting crushed by the simultaneous arrival of mortgages, kids, aging parents who need help, and the general sense that you should own furniture that wasn't assembled with an Allen wrench. Here's where the timeline gets interesting, though. Let's say you manage to accumulate $100,000 by age 35. Solid achievement. You've crossed a psychological threshold. If you never contributed another dollar and just let it sit there growing at 10% annually, you'd have $1,074 million by 65. Just from that $100,000 and 30 years of compound interest. But most people won't let it sit. They'll keep contributing, which is where the math starts working in your favor instead of against you. At $100,000, a 10% return gives you $10,000 in a single year without lifting a finger. That's probably more than you saved your entire first year of working. The money is finally making meaningful money. By the time you hit $250,000, a good year in the market adds $25,000 to your account. That's a used car. That's someone's entire annual savings. Except you didn't have to work for it. Your old money is working for you. This is why wealthy people seem to get richer effortlessly, while normal people grind forever to get ahead. It's not that rich people are smarter or work harder. It's that they've crossed the threshold where their money works harder than they do. A person with $2 million earning 10% makes $200,000 a year from their investments alone. That's more than most people earn from their actual jobs. They could literally stop working and maintain a comfortable lifestyle just from investment returns. But getting to that point, that's the 20-year journey most people aren't willing to take. I calculated this out for someone recently who was 28 and feeling behind. She had $18,000 saved, which felt like nothing compared to where she wanted to be. I showed her that if she could save $200 a month, aggressive but doable on her income, she'd hit $100,000 by 34, $250,000 by 40, $500,000 by 45, and crack $1 million by 51. Her reaction was visceral disappointment. "I'll be 51, she said, like I just told her she'd be waiting for a package that wouldn't arrive for 2 decades. But yeah, that's how long it takes. The alternative timeline, where she saves less aggressively, stretches into her late 50s or 60s. There's no version of this story where she's rich by 35 unless she starts earning way more money or gets incredibly lucky with some investment. The people who can't accept timelines like this end up making desperate moves. They dump money into cryptocurrency, hoping to 10x their investment in a year. They start day trading with money they can't afford to lose. They invest in their brother-in-law's revolutionary business idea that needs $25,000 of capital. They're trying to hack the timeline because 23 years feels like forever. And occasionally, very occasionally, it works. Someone buys the right crypto at the right time and turns $5,000 into $180,000. But for every person with that story, there are 50 people who turned $5,000 into $400. The success stories dominate social media because nobody posts about their losses. So everyone thinks shortcuts are everywhere when actually they're statistically irrelevant. I know a guy who was on track to retire at 58 with about $1.2 million. Solid plan, boring, but effective. At 52, he got impatient. Took $200,000 from his retirement accounts and invested in a friend's restaurant. The restaurant failed within 18 months. That $200,000 could have been $650,000 by the time he turned 65. Instead, it's zero. Plus, he paid penalties and taxes for withdrawing it early. One impatient decision added almost a decade to his working career. The other factor nobody accounts for is that life will absolutely try to derail you. There's almost no scenario where you save consistently for 25 years without interruption. You'll lose a job at some point. Someone in your family will need financial help. You'll have a medical situation. Your car will die at the worst possible time. Each of these events delays your timeline by months or years, depending on how severe they are. My own timeline got wrecked when I was 33. I'd been building momentum, had about $95,000 saved, felt like I was finally getting somewhere. Then, my dad's health deteriorated rapidly. He needed full-time care, and my mom couldn't handle it alone. I ended up covering a lot of expenses they couldn't manage, probably $40,000 over 2 years. My net worth basically flatlined during that period. Was I angry about it? Not really. He's my dad. But it did mean my timeline got pushed back. The wealth I would have built in my mid-30s didn't happen. I'm rebuilding now, but I'm 5 years behind where I should be, according to the theoretical optimal timeline. And you know what? That's fine. Life happens. The people with perfect wealth-building timelines either got incredibly lucky or they're lying about their situations. Let's talk about the age you start versus the age you get serious, because this distinction matters more than anything else. Starting at 25 with casual $200 monthly contributions that you occasionally skip is worse than starting at 32 with serious $1,500 monthly contributions you never miss. I've seen this pattern repeat endlessly. Someone starts investing young, but treats it like a hobby. A decade later, they have less money than someone who started later, but immediately went all in. The wealth-building timeline is less about chronological age and more about how many years you've been operating at maximum intensity. If you've been saving for 10 years, but only really got serious about it 2 years ago, you've got 2 years of real wealth building, not 10. Those first 8 years were practice rounds. Think about it this way. If you're 38 and just now committing to saving 25% of your $95,000 income, you're putting away nearly $24,000 annually. Someone who's been casually saving since they were 25, contributing maybe $400 a month when they remember, has probably accumulated less than you'll accumulate in your first 3 serious years. The intensity beats the duration. There's also a massive income variable that changes everything. Someone making $55,000 who saves 20% is investing $11,000 a year. Someone making $140,000 who saves 20% is investing $28,000 a year. The higher earner will hit $1 million roughly 12 years faster, all else being equal. This is why career optimization in your 20s and 30s is actually a wealth-building strategy. Getting promoted, switching jobs for raises, developing high-income skills, all of that directly accelerates your timeline. I've seen people get so focused on savings rate that they ignore income growth entirely. They're proud of saving 22% of their $48,000 income, and they should be. That's disciplined. But $10,060 annually invested will take them about 32 years to hit $1 million. Meanwhile, someone making $110,000 saving just 15% is investing $16,500 annually and will hit $1 million in about 23 years. Sometimes the answer isn't cutting more expenses, it's earning more money. The retirement age assumptions also warp these timelines. Everyone calculates to age 65 because that's retirement age. But what if you want to retire at 55? Now you've cut 10 years off your timeline, which means you need to save dramatically more to compensate for the lost compound interest years. Retiring at 55 with the same lifestyle as retiring at 65 might require saving 35% of your income instead of 15%. Can you do that? Most people can't. Conversely, if you're willing to work until 70, your timeline gets way more forgiving. You can save less aggressively, ride out market downturns without panic, and still end up with plenty of money. But nobody wants to hear that working until 70 is their financial plan. We all want to believe we'll retire at 58 and spend 2 decades traveling and pursuing hobbies. The math doesn't support that dream for most people, but we hold on to it anyway. Here's something that's going to sound depressing, but is actually kind of liberating. If you're 42 and you've got $60,000 saved, you're not doomed. You're behind where the financial planning charts say you should be, but you've got 23 plus years until traditional retirement age. If you can get serious right now, really serious, not casual, and save $2,000 monthly, you'll have around $1.3 million by 65. Combined with Social Security, that's a perfectly comfortable retirement. But you don't get to waste another 5 years planning to get serious. You don't get to save $2,000 a month for 6 months, decide it's too hard, and drop to $400. You've got to commit to the full timeline with maximum intensity. That's the deal. No more false starts, no more excuses, no more waiting for the perfect time. The timeline starts now, or it doesn't start at all. The people who successfully build wealth aren't smarter than you. They didn't get secret information. They didn't have unfair advantages, mostly. What they had was the ability to accept an uncomfortable timeline and stick with it anyway. They saved money for 5 years while watching their friends take expensive vacations. They drove used cars through their 30s while their coworkers leased BMWs. They packed lunches into their 40s while others ate out daily. And then one day, usually somewhere in their late 40s or 50s, they checked their account balance and realized they'd become wealthy without noticing exactly when it happened. The wealth crept up on them because they were too busy being consistent to pay attention to the slow accumulation. That's how it actually works. Not with a dramatic breakthrough moment, but with decade after decade of boring discipline that eventually produces extraordinary results. So how long does it actually take to build real wealth? If you're starting from zero in your 20s, probably 20 to 25 years to hit your first million. Starting in your 30s, add another 5 to 8 years. Starting in your 40s, you're looking at working well into your 60s, or accepting a more modest definition of wealth. Those are the real timelines. Not sexy, not quick, not what the gurus promised you, but real, achievable, and proven by millions of people who actually built wealth instead of just talking about it. Your timeline starts the moment you decide to take it seriously. Not when conditions are perfect, not when you're making more money, not next year. Now.